got my email, hopefully, and maybe Joe, that Dan Frost had not received an invite to the executive session nor to the board meeting. So if you can get one to him.
I'll send it over to him right now.
Thank you.
And then we need Rick Carpenter.
Well,
Rick Carpenter is on. I just let him
He
in.
got my email.
Okay,
hopefully, and
okay, well, I called the meeting to order, so I think we're okay. We're good now. Okay, so Karen, is Karen? Yes.
I am on.
Will you
May I
please-
take roll?
Yes, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Counselor Vihil Coppler,
Here?
Commissioner Hanson,
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Here,
Mr. Helms,
Here.
Counselor Romero Worth,
I'm here.
and Mr. Eaglehoff.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
I'm
Mr.
sorry, I was muted. No, Madam Chair, there are no changes from staff.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Any changes from the board?
no,
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would like to move to approve the agenda.
okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Karen, will you please call the roll? I mean, for the vote.
Sure. Perhaps I could just ask if there's any opposition.
I think we're required to have a roll call.
All right, thank you. Sorry. Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes,
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes,
and Chair Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Any changes from the board? Commissioner Hamilton?
we're on the consent agenda, yes? I just thought I have no problem with leaving them both on, but it seems like it might be for informational purposes useful to have a few words said about the second item. I don't think it's worth pulling off for that,
Well, you can't, we either approve the consent agenda or we don't. So if you want to talk about it, then you need to remove it. If you don't really have anything germane to say, then you should not remove anything. How's that?
okay, well, if nobody else has questions about it, we had plenty of discussion. I'm fine with it. Leave it on.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second,
All right, Karen, will you please call for the vote?
Yes. Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
yes,
Commissioner Hanson,
yes,
and Counselor Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from the July 2nd Buckman Direct Diversion Board meeting. Anybody have any changes to the minutes?
yes, I do.
Got it. Commissioner Hanson.
Okay, I just have to find my page. So it's kind of a question. It's on page 13. Ms. Romero is talking at the top. Ms. Romero says I have to double check the minutes, but it was 3:10. I'm wondering if the 3:10 should have a $sign in front of it.
Do you want to make a motion? Do you want to make a recommendation to amend the minutes to that effect?
I do, but I'm, because I think we're talking about money. So I think it would be appropriate. Is that correct, Mackie?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, that is correct.
Okay, so I think it should have a $sign in front of it.
Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
Yes, so I move to approve the minutes with a change on page 13 with those changes.
Second.
been moved and seconded. Karen, will you please call for the vote?
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Counselor Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're down to matters from the public, and we do have one submittal, and Joni Aaron's, I think, is on the call here, the screen perhaps. Jamie, no, it's Joni.
Joni.
I'm trying to find you. Darn, I lost you. Joni, right. Are you, oh, there you go. You're unmuted. So you'll have 2 minutes to make your presentation. Could you start now?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am a co-founder and executive director of Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety, or CCNS. We formed in 1988 to address community concerns about the proposed transportation of radioactive, hazardous, and toxic waste from Los Alamos National Laboratory to the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant through Santa Fe on St. Francis Drive. I would like to thank the BDD board for their leadership to protest the defective and inadequate application of the Department of Energy and Los Alamos County Public Utilities Division to the state engineer to transfer 679 acre-feet per year in water rights to the hexavalent chromium plume remediation project. While CCNS supports cleanup at Lanel, we do not support the incomplete application, as the application does not include the required return flow plan. The impacts to the Rio Grande are unknown. We believe the state engineer must deny the application. Thank you again, board members, for your leadership on this very important issue. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Joni. We appreciate your comments. Okay, there's no other public comment, Jamie Ray, as I understand?
I'm sorry, what was that?
There's no other public comment?
No other public comment.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Next item are informational items. Number 7, report on August 4th, 2020 Fiscal Services Audit Committee. Mackie Romero.
Madam Chair, members of the board, a Fiscal Service and Audit Committee meeting was held on August 4th. In attendance was myself, BDD Financial Manager, Rick Carpenter, BDD Facilities Manager, Chair Joanne Vihil Coppler, from the County Commissioner Hamilton, John Dupria, Santa Fe County Utilities Director. From Las Campanas, we had Tom Eaglehoff and Andrew Resnick. We discussed consent agenda item number 12, which was to reauthorize funding from the Major Repair and Replacement Fund. We discussed consent agenda item number 13, which was to ratify the emergency procurement and enter into a contract with TLC Company. And we discussed action item number 14, which is a request to ratify and adopt the budget. This will also be discussed later on in the agenda. Are there any questions from FISA?
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mackie. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 8, monthly update on BDD operations. Mr. Sugrue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. In the month of July, our raw water diversions averaged about 8.65 million gallons per day. Our drinking water deliveries through our booster stations averaged about 7 gallons per day. Our raw water delivery to Las Campanas, about 1.4 million gallons per day. On-site treated and non-treated water storage, 0.15 million gallons per day. BDDs providing approximately 54% of the water supply to the city and county for the month. We do have a regional demand drought summary attached. You can see on our year-to-date comparison, our July production and diversions were up somewhat from the average due to availability and Canyon Road Water Treatment Facility backing off their production a bit. We did have 3 or 4 turbidity events in the river due to rainfall upstream, but we did not have any early notification system alerts. The rainfall was merely in the northern part of the state, and turbidity washed down the river. That's it. I stand for questions.
I'm sorry, I have to ask what that word is. I don't, turbidity? Is that
Oh,
what you?
turbidity. Right. It's based on a Greek word for cloudiness, and essentially it's the muddiness of the water. The more cloudy, the more sediment suspended in the water. When rainfall occurs in the northern part of the state or upstream anywhere and washes sediment into the river, we get the muddy brown color. So the higher the turbidity, the harder the water is to treat. At a certain point, we just shut off our diversions. We don't want to be diverting muddy water and incurring higher treatment costs, therefore.
Thank you. I learned a new word. Okay, Commissioner Hamilton.
Thanks. First of all, Randy, you get a gold star. You get the gold star for the day for giving the Greek etymology of that word. I love it.
Very good.
That's perfect. And I actually have 2 questions. Well, one of them is for sure for you. I'm not sure about the other one. The first one is the turbidity was low enough not to trigger a stop of withdrawals, but do you think it affects operation? Well, treatment.
Well,
Do you see that in the treatment?
At 3 or 4 times, it was high enough for us to stop diverting for 6 to 8 hours. When the turbidity is above what we call 600 NTU, nephelometric turbidity units, that's where the Greek word comes in. We do just shut off, because that would adversely affect the amount of sediment that we bring up to the facility. Otherwise, if the turbidity is less than 600 NTU, we still divert. We can deal with the additional sediments. In the wintertime, the turbidity in the river is normally less than 10. And so that very clean water offsets the additional expenses in warm weather. We have much lower treatment costs in the wintertime due to the cleanliness of the water.
Yeah, and the other question, I'm not sure if you want to take this or we want to wait until Mr. Carpenter makes his report. I'm just understandably curious about how things are going with flows, which were down, but then we have some monsoons, and I didn't know if you brought your crystal ball or if anybody else did. Just wondering what the prognosis is for diversion.
If we could, let's defer that.
Commissioner, I was planning on probably getting into that on my item, but we have had a lot of discussions around this issue. We have some information to offer. We've got some planning that's been taking place if this does actually occur. And I'm happy to address any questions that you have under this item, or we can just delay till mine.
Yeah, I'm happy to wait. It just, of course, that made me think about it now. So sorry, we're happy to wait.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to thank you, Randy, for working on the map. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And it makes it much easier to read, although I can see that there doesn't seem to be any water now at El Vado. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I just wanted
You're welcome.
And then I did have one question on the El Nino, La Nina, and El Nino. So it looks like it says it's neutral on La Nina. So does that mean we're gonna have the same kind of winter we had last year, or are we gonna have a different kind of winter?
If I could defer that to Rick, possibly. You have much more experience with interpreting this, Rick.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for that.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Hamilton, the short answer to that is when NOAA calls it neutral, that means they're saying there's an equal chance of above or an equal chance of below normal precipitation. So I wouldn't compare it to last year necessarily. That's not what they mean. They just mean that it's equal chances of slightly above or slightly below.
Thank you, Rick. It's Commissioner Hanson.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. Commissioner Hamilton and I are used to it.
Okay, any other comments? I do have one last question now. How do you spell that word turbidity? It's not popping in my dictionary.
Turbidity is Turbidity.
I,
ITY, Turbidity, and the units are NTUs, nephelometric turbidity units.
wow. All
The
right.
Greek
well,
word-
You
the
won
Greek
the
word I
spelling
believe is
bee
nephelos.
tonight.
Very
I wish
good.
I had a ribbon.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's why it wasn't coming up. I wasn't spelling it right. So, all right. Thank you for your report. Next item is number 9, report from the facilities manager. Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, Madam Chair. I originally had many items to report out to the board under this item, but they have translated into specific standalone items later on in the agenda. So there are still a couple of items that I would like to report out to the board. The first starts with work furloughs. As most of you already know, but if you don't, the operators have been determined to be exempt from the furloughs. So they're back to their normal scheduled hours. So, and that'll be maintained. And all furloughs, as far as I know, and Mr. Roach may want to chime in on this if he has any updated information, but as far as I know, the furloughs are scheduled to end on September 4th. And that would be for all employees, not just operators. So that's an update there if you didn't already know. The second item that I have is a follow-on to the comment from the public. Lanel and Los Alamos County have submitted an application to transfer water rights. I thought it was 672, but maybe it's 679. Anyway, a large amount of water rights from various locations to the remediation site. In speaking with representatives from Lanel, Mr. Harwood and myself, and representatives from Glorieta Geoscience, it was explained to us that yes, they're going to transfer those water rights. Yes, they're going to use it for injection wells. They're going to use it for extraction wells, and that there's going to be no net depletion, but we don't have any indication of that. And it's not in the application. It's not there. So when it was termed earlier as incomplete, I think that's probably the right term. It's the term I would use. And we didn't make as much progress with the folks from Lanel that we had hoped. And the deadline to file the protest was Wednesday, yesterday. And since we were running out of time, we filed the protest. So the BDD has filed a protest on that application. Mr. Harwood will probably want to correct me on this. I don't know whether we would want to term it a friendly protest or just a regular old straight up protest. But we need more information, and there's ways to do it. We don't want to stand in the way of the remediation. We don't want to get involved in any emergency measures that they're taking. But the application, in our view, was incomplete. And so that protest has been filed with the Office of the State Engineer. The County of Santa Fe has also filed a protest along similar grounds, as far as I know. And Madam Chair, that concludes my update. I'd stand for questions.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Kyle. I completely appreciate you leading the charge on this and trying to negotiate with Lanel on this before the protest was due and talking to them about it. And it is true, Santa Fe County did file a protest also. So there are at least 2 protests to their application. I don't know if there could be more, but I think that's important. Kyle, do you want to say something?
We'll find out soon whether there are additional protests beyond this board in Santa Fe counties, and I do have a call with MMSA General Counsel next week to explore both the resolution of the protest as well as get an update on the MOU negotiation. And I hope that we'll have a substantive agenda item on the September board meeting so that we can give the whole board a full update on all of these issues and how they're interconnected.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions for Mr. Carpenter? Okay, thank you, Rick. Next item is item 10, update on the low flow operations at BDD. Mr. Roach, I think, there you are.
Madam Chair, I know that Mr. Roach is listed on this, and I welcome him to jump in anytime he wishes. But it might be appropriate if you would allow me to make just some introductory comments on at a high level.
Sure.
On what the intent of this item really is.
Okay.
And I think it was alluded to earlier in some of the comments. So do we have a crystal ball? That's maybe a good way to put it. It's probably maybe a little better than a crystal ball, but nobody knows for sure. But what we think we're looking at are critically low flows starting pretty soon, especially if MRGCDs decides not to call for water or they run out of water. And there's not a lot of carriage water in the river. We're going to be looking at very low flows, both San Juan Chama and native flows. It's important to keep that distinction in mind. Probably around maybe the end of August, but probably almost certainly into September, possibly even into early October. We don't know. What we do know is there's a high likelihood that we're going to have critically low flows. How critical? We may have to shut the BDD down. Below a certain level, we think it's probably around 200 CFS. We probably cannot physically divert the water. There are also permit restrictions and low flow curtailment criteria where we have to gradually reduce our diversions of native flows as those flows go down as determined at the Ottawa gauge. So we'll be monitoring it closely. We are currently not diverting any native flows, and I want to make that very clear for the record. The BDD is not diverting native water currently. What we are diverting is imported San Juan Chama water. But we will be monitoring it closely. The Bureau of Reclamation has come out with a new tool that we hope, we think will be very helpful in measuring native Rio Grande flows so that we can be more precise about when we meet certain thresholds according to our various permits, the biological opinion and the Coordination Act report, we call the CAR. So we do have restrictions. When we get down to around 200, certainly not below 150 CFS, we're going to have to stop diversions. We don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but we think it's a very high likelihood. And we do have plans in place to monitor that. We do have plans in place to do other things and to optimize that. And that's the subject of the next agenda item, that we can still be more efficient under those conditions. So that's really, I guess, my update on that item. But if Randy or Kyle, if you want to add to that or correct me if I misspoke, please, Madam Chair, if it pleases you, Randy or Kyle, if you want to jump in.
No, that's a good summary.
Okay. Kyle, did you have anything to add?
I don't think so. There's more detail to know depending on the board's level of interest. Jesse Roach, I think, maybe has something to add.
Right. Jesse, how about you?
I don't at this time. Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to help with questions if there's something that I can help with.
Okay, well, let's move to questions from the board. Anyone have any questions? All righty then. Y'all did a good job. Oh, Commissioner Hanson.
If we do have to shut the diversion down, how long do you think it will be shut down for?
We don't know. I'm sorry, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hanson. We don't know. It could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. There's just
Okay.
no way to really know it. I wouldn't think that it would go past mid-October, but there are too many variables to say with any precision what that might be.
Yeah, I'm sure it depends on our rainfall and what's released from up above. Okay, thank you.
It also depends on the reason for the shutdown, I think.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all. Next item is number 11, potential BDD and Canyon Road summer fall shutdowns and opportunity for possible cross-training for staff. Rick Carpenter.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I think Jesse will want to weigh in on this one, but I guess I can start things off. So in anticipation of the likelihood that the BDD will be shut down later this summer, and also in recognition that Canyon Road will also shut down as part of their operations, different reasons, but they will likely be shut down in the fall. There's an opportunity to make the best of the situation in ways that we're trying to be creative about. And one of those ways, and I think that Mr. Roach, Dr. Roach will want to weigh in on, is that if BDD happens to be shut down for a month or however long it is, an operator or others could go to the Canyon Road plant and learn more about how that plant is run and sort of cross-train and shadow those employees. And then when later in the fall, when Canyon Road shuts down, there's a likewise opportunity for one or more operators to come from Canyon Road down to the BDD and learn more about how we run our plant. And that's a way to optimize and be efficient and to give our employees an opportunity to learn. In speaking with Mackie Romero, there are cost codes that are set aside so that we can keep the time straight and bill the appropriate entity for that time. So that shouldn't be an issue either. And so that's just sort of a higher level view of what we're thinking. And Dr. Roach, if you would like to weigh in, I don't want to take too much of your time.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you, Rick. Thanks for that introduction. I don't need to get much further into it, only to say that from the city perspective, having 2 water treatment plants, we would like to have the resiliency in place where if something strange happens and a bunch of operators get sick or whatever, there are operators at one plant who might be able to come over and help for a short term. So we would like to improve the knowledge that the operators at Canyon Road have about BDD and vice versa. And as Rick mentioned, we typically do shut down Canyon Road for 2 weeks each year to clean. And we're thinking about shutting it down for a month this year. And the idea here is to get a little bit of feedback from the board. My thought would be that anytime we shut down Canyon Road, if we send an operator of a certain level for a certain amount of time to BDD to help out and to learn about BDD, we would try and do the same thing. And when BDD shuts down, send a similar operator for a similar amount of time to Canyon Road. So this is an effort to improve the sort of overall skill set of operators at both facilities. I think BDD operators understanding more how the overall system works, and city, Canyon Road operators understanding more how BDD operates is very advantageous.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roach. That has a good sound to it. I'm a real fan of cross-training. Anytime an organization can implement it, it does a lot of good for an organization. So if that has to happen, there's a lot of good that can come out of it. So I'm pleased that that's on your radar. Any other comments? Commissioner Hamilton. Oh.
Thanks, I would agree. And just for the record, I think Dr. Roach's crystal modeling is usually better than a crystal ball by at least, a a little bit. No, I would agree. It almost sounds what I was going to ask was if there isn't a shutdown at BDD. I mean, we might do, it sounds like you might do one anyway if you needed to, but if there isn't one, did we have plans for being able to achieve some sort of cross-training, without a shutdown? It sounds like from Canyon Road, you shut that down anyway sometimes, but anyway, that's sort of my general question. It's a good idea. Do we have plans for doing this?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, thank you for asking that, because after I finished talking, I realized that I had not mentioned that one of the agreements, and I don't know how much the board knows about this, but we are working with the county on an agreement on sort of how we can utilize different water resources at BDD during different times of the year. And there's an advantage there for the county when we can't divert native, but there's a potential advantage there for the city just for operational flexibility. And so we would, if we can get that agreement into place, and if we establish some framework for this cross-training, then we could implement what I'm calling discretionary shutdowns at BDD, where we say we don't have to shut BDD down, but we're going to plan to shut BD down for 2 weeks to a month, during which period we will deep clean, or, Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Segru will decide what's the best thing to do when the plant is off, but that may include some cross-training. And we're trying to work out an agreement with the county so that the county is not hurt in any way if the city decides, okay, let's go ahead and shut down BDD for 2 weeks to 4 weeks, just because there's these operational flexibilities and advantages that we can achieve.
And I just want to say that I know some that the city and the county you guys have been working together on that, and I really appreciate that you guys are doing that. It's a really good thing that you guys are working together on and cooperating. I certainly hope it's like benefit to the whole, it's got to be a benefit to the whole integrated operation of serving water. Thanks for doing that.
Okay, Mr. Eaglehoff.
Madam Chair, I guess I had a question for Rick or Randy. Do we have any pressing maintenance opportunities, like maybe cleaning out the forebay, or do we need to put the coffer box in and check screens? Are you guys looking at any of that while we're down, so that wouldn't come up potentially in the future when we're back up?
Madam Chair and Mr. Eaglehoff, yes, we are looking at that. We have some larger projects that are more on the maintenance side than on the operations side that we've already talked about. If we do shut down, that's some of the first things we would do is clean some of the basins, get some things repaired that we've not been able to get to. It's a real opportunity to catch up, and we've had those discussions, and they are ongoing.
Oh, perfect. Thanks.
Can't hear you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much for your reports. Next is under discussion and action, item 14, discussion of amended fiscal year 2021 annual operating budget in the amount of $8,006,000 plus $626,000 in contributions to the major repair replacement fund. Mackie Romero.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this is a request to ratify and formally adopt the amended fiscal year 2021 annual operating budget. On February 6th, the BDD board did approve and recommend a budget of $9,659,797 plus $626,706 of contributions to the major repair and replacement fund. Since this recommendation, the current pandemic has caused economic hardships on our partners. Therefore, BDD was BDD staff was tasked with reducing the approved budget without affecting core essential functions. The amended budget that was prepared by BDD staff was approved by Santa Fe City Council on July 29th. On July 14th, Santa Fe County Commission approved the amount requested in the approved budget, and it did not include the reductions presented today. The BDD had to evaluate all expenditure line items from the approved budget to determine costs that could be reduced. I do want to note that this reduced budget that's being presented today is not the same budget that was presented to the board back in June. This is a different version of that budget. So in order for BDD to reduce its budget, we had to evaluate all our costs. The evaluation process that we went through included prior year actual comparisons, delay of filling positions, delay of purchases, and reduction of non-essential expenses. During this process, we were able to reduce the budget by $1,006,082. The details of the reduction by major category are presented on page 3 of your packet. This reduction did not adjust any of the partners' water delivery projections, and it provides the funding needed to operate and maintain the facilities to meet the demands of the partners. The budget will be monitored closely and funds will be moved as needed. Even with the reductions presented today, the budget still includes carryover of prior year furlough savings, funding for the HVAC replacement project, and funding to fill 1 vacant maintenance position. The BDD board also approved carryover funding of $310,000 to support projects that could not be completed in fiscal year 2020. This request also continues funding the major repair and replacement fund for an annual contribution of $626,706. And with this contribution, the estimated cash balance in this fund would be a little bit over $2.4 million. With this submittal, we request that the BDD board ratify and formally adopt the fiscal year 2021 operating budget request of $8,653,715, plus the contributions to the major repair and replacement fund, for a total request of $9,280,420. Are there any questions about the amended budget?
Commissioner Hamilton.
Thanks. I think it's you guys clearly did some very good work, and we had discussions about it at FSAC about the different items that are listed in the packet. So the different categories. I wonder if we might go through the categories, because it seems to me there are several things that can be postponed. It's reasonable to try to do those savings, and there are a few things that I would appreciate further discussion on, and with the possibility of doing, giving the board the opportunity to request certain remodifications before approval. So if that's good with you, I mean, I can ask if we start with salaries and benefits, I really wanted to get some discussion on the second position that's being postponed, which is also relative to maintenance. I think I have general concerns about, as you know, about not fully funding staff for things that right now, especially in terms of operations and maintenance, are so critical for the way BDD operates. You guys indicated that it would take, and I agree, I have no problem with it. It will take several months to like re-describe that position and even post it. But I think it's a little, I would suggest that it would be better to take, if the estimated time to re-describe that position is up to half a year, that we put half a year of that salary in the budget, because it is, an important O&M position. So if we could start with that.
Okay, that would be fine. I want to start out by saying we did discuss this certainly at the city's budget hearings, and we discussed it at FISAC. And what I understand to be the case is that the position title as it is now and the description of duties, and you alluded to that, is not what is needed at this point at BDD. So, you know, obviously taking time to reclassify the position, to study its duties and develop all the framework that's required will take some time, and then getting it through HR. But what I heard, and Mr. Carpenter can correct me, at FISAC and prior to that, is that this is not a position that is right now sorely needed. And I agree with you, if it comes to, you know, we should start at least the preparation for reclassifying it and all that, and really deciding what that position needs to fulfill to help BDD operations, and go through the process. Now, what I also heard during the budget hearings and at City Council discussion of the budget is that we, not only BDD, but any organization in city government who comes across needs that haven't been met based on the budget, and these are real needs, it's not a stagnant budget. It can be changed, it can be updated. And we heard many times that we were going to be revisiting the budget and getting updates as time passed, and not only the needs expressed by departments and certainly BDD, but the needs, the updates on how we are looking, you know, as far as the coffers are concerned. So, you know, it's not set in stone. And I think I like the idea that, you know, it will be revisited. And so I think there's opportunity to determine whether, you know, whether we need that position, how soon we need that position, and of course move forward with what is required to get that position up and running and ready in the event we can fund it. So Mr. Carpenter or Mackie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I won't delete you from this screen.
Madam Chair, I think you summarized it accurately.
Mackie?
I appreciate what you're saying. I don't think the fact that we're allowed to revisit budgets, which is clear, and it's very clear that the typical uncertainties that always are associated with estimating budgets for a whole year of operation, whether it's for BDD or the city or the county or any organization, are there, and they're increased with, you know, what we see in COVID. I don't think it takes away the board's obligation to try to budget accurately. And I think when I take it in total, my other thought is that what's indicated is that there are additional savings by minimizing overtime. So the way I understand it, what we've budgeted in this revised budget that we're considering now is there's a certain amount of predictable overtime that's associated with the fact that you have people that are doing shift work. We have 24/7 operations. And if the operators and maybe some other staff work 36, 48, there's some overtime by definition in there because of federal law. And that's the only overtime we have in the budget. And I just think that's a little bit too aggressive. Like, I understand that we've had a couple of years where our budgets are always exceeded a little bit from what the actuals are. And the goal here is to reduce everything down to what the actuals had been. And I respect the need to try to minimize expenses. So there are, if we go through all of these, there are places where I agree, postponing some of the capital, because that risk can be managed if we blew it and and there's a big capital piece we really need, we can go back for it. But I think, and I also understand there's some anticipation that if we shut down, we're going to be saving personnel time doing that. But I know in other parts of the budget were some of the savings from dropping some of the maintenance for, you know, the external contracts, like for doing grounds maintenance, you know, and whatnot are being achieved by saying we're going to do that internally. So the idea of cutting down to no predictable, unexpected overtime just seems inappropriate. And I do come back to the thing that for the previous 3 years, every single year we've had a discussion about operating without certain positions filled, that it was a higher risk. And we were so relieved, like in January or whenever before COVID, but at the beginning of the year, that we were finally up to full staffing. And I feel like it's fine to take the half-year savings because we'll never get it reclassified in 2 weeks. So if predictably it takes 6 months, I just don't think it's appropriate to dump all of it or to not put a little bit of overtime.
So Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, we did leave overtime in the budget. We have $110,000. It was reduced by $40,000. We spent $206,000 in overtime in 2019, but we weren't fully staffed either. So the estimate was based on the fact that we are fully staffed now. And so we do feel that that $110,000 should be sufficient to cover the built-in overtime that's within the budget. And it also gives staff an opportunity to look at the schedules and see if there's any additional opportunity to save in overtime if we were to adjust some of the schedules. But the budget was not built with that in mind. It was just built in mind with that we are fully staffed now. And so we should see overtime be reduced from prior years.
So, but I thought I understood at FSAC that the overtime that was left in the budget was only the predictable overtime having to do with doing shift work.
So we budgeted $110,000 that was related to, you're correct, to the built-in overtime on their schedules and shift and graveyard that's required as part of that.
So if one operator gets COVID and is out, there's no overtime in the budget that would then be incurred. It's as we're talking about probably a fairly small amount of money. You guys have done a great job cutting down $1 million. If there's 130 hours and we need some contingency overtime, the idea of having to come back, that just seems predictable. And the idea of having to come back and resubmit, revise the budget for something that was this predictable, Anyway, I don't know if nobody else is concerned about this, I will get voted out. I would like to see a little bit of a revision to that. I don't think it makes that big a difference, but I just don't see not doing what seems to me to be predictable, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic where the idea that somebody could be taken out of circulation for a period of time is higher than normal.
Okay, Councilor Romero-Worth, and then Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm a little bit confused. Commissioner Hamilton, you started off talking about putting in half of what was required for the second position that is frozen, and then you ended up talking about putting more money in for overtime. So I'm somewhere in there you shifted. I'm not quite sure what if you're advocating for both those things or one or the other? So that's one question.
And very quickly, I actually, they're both, I'm actually advocating for both of them. I think a half a year of salary because it's an O&M position. And for operators, we're up to full staffing, but clearly we think that position's needed. And then the overtime is a separate issue. I don't think either of them are very big dollar items, but.
Okay, so I think it would be important for us to maybe take them one at a time. I did hear that that second position isn't needed at the moment. So it seems like, and given the uncertainty in which we're budgeting in, it seems like we would want to wait and see how our revenues are doing and revisit down the road here. I would like, if somebody has the budget, I don't know, Mackie, if you do the graph that shows the actuals versus the budgeted amount.
Madam Chair, Councillor Romero Worth, I can share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
And I just want to point out this graph, which shows that for the last 5 years, our expenses have been lower than what we have budgeted. And so I'm not sure, given this graph, that we need to budget more, just to budget more. It looks like we've been fine. And I think, if there needs to be, if that position comes, if folks figure out the classification for that position and how to list it and advertise for it, it seems like there could be some sort of budget adjustment request made, and we can see how we're doing. I think the important thing right now is that we get a budget at this point. We are into the fiscal year. I think to do the operations that are required, we need to get this budget approved. And if there's some tweaking that needs to happen down the road, I think we can do that. And I actually would like to take a deeper look at the overtime. I'd like somebody to maybe make a presentation to us about, how that overtime works and have a better understanding before we put more money into overtime. And especially given the fact that the staff has said, this is overtime that we think is appropriate now that we are fully staffed. And so I'm not sure that the rationale is there to add just to add or to pad, especially in these uncertain revenue times. So I just wanted to make those points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Do you want to respond to that point?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I think they're mostly really good points. I do not want to pad the budget at all. I agree with much of what you're saying. I will point out that last year, that cushion, that was transferred into litigation costs. So if we're sure that what we have under litigation costs is adequate, and we're sure that what we have under personnel time, because we're shifting a lot of what we had been done under contracts, which we haven't gotten to yet, into being done internally because we can do them more efficiently, then yes, I would agree. If anybody's arguing we don't need that O&M position when we know that that's a sensitive topic, why was it put in the budget? So in the wash of things, yes, there's a limited liability to having to come back and reinsert things in the budget. But I really feel like these are predictable things that I actually think we will see the need for. That's why I'm suggesting making sure they're in the budget now will save us headaches later, and there will be a realistic recognition of what our expenses will be. I don't want to do it to pad the budget just in case, but this has been achieved, and many of the things, like I said, I have no problem with doing. This has been achieved by cutting all of the cushion out of the budget. You know, BDD's been operating for a while, and that overtime has never been able to be reduced. If we can look at it and figure out a scheme that works better, that reduces overtime further, that's great. But we right now don't know that that's doable. So I was just looking toward doing what I frankly think is predictable. So yeah, I agree that we have been below actuals, that is, have been below budget for, and we should definitely take advantage of that under the circumstances. But there were just a few items that I brought up that I think are probably being cut a little too aggressively.
Okay.
That's all.
Commissioner Hanson. Mackie, can you stop sharing the screen, please?
Sure.
Thank you. You have to unmute yourself, Commissioner.
Unmuted.
There we go.
Okay. And so I think everyone has heard me speak numerous times about the importance of sampling and the treat study. Excuse me. And I don't want to see that cut from the budget. I consider that really important. It is a perfect example of what has happened with this protest that we just filed, is that we have people up the hill who are not taking their jobs as seriously as possibly we are taking ours. And I really care about sampling, and I really care about making sure that our water is safe and protected. I also care about our MOU, and I know that that is going to take time, and I do not want to see those things cut from the budget. I understand your concern, Councilor Romero Worth, about, oh, well, we've over budgeted, but I don't think we really have over budgeted, because we're always very close and tight when it gets down to the end. At least that's what I have seen happen over the years. I agree with Commissioner Hamilton on the fact of employees. I think if we have to reclassify, we've done this before on other, on some of the operators, we had to reclassify them. If we're cutting our maintenance agreement and bringing it in-house, then maybe we are going to need more people on staff to deal with the maintenance. So there's, you know, there's always two sides to every coin. I think that I think we need to look more carefully at the budget. I don't think that $1 million cut is necessary. I think maybe something more like a $500,000 cut to the budget might be more accurate. The city has money in the water fund to pay their budget, and pay their bills. You know, providing if water isn't, as I've said numerous times, and I've heard Councilor Romero Worth quote me, you know, this is an essential service, and we're bringing in money. You know, this is an enterprise fund at the city. This is a separate fund. People are still paying their water bills, at least I hope they are. I still am paying my water bills. I live in the city. So I think there's, I think we need to continue to look at this and actually make a better budget, because I'm not completely satisfied.
Okay, Counselor Romero Worth.
So we've heard from staff that these cuts are manageable, that they don't need the position, that they think they have enough in overtime. We've seen the graph that says that we always budget more than our actuals. I think we're going to be coming back to look at this budget long-term, but I think it's really important that we get this budget approved and that we have a start to this fiscal year that's already underway. So I would move that we pass this budget as it is.
I'll second it. Okay, let's have more discussion. Rick, I'd like to hear from you on this.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Couple of points. Mackie and I have put, with input from others, a lot of effort into the budget that you have before you. It's certainly not optimum, but it is manageable. And a couple of points on that that I'd just like to remind the board of. We can come back and revisit the budget and make adjustments if necessary. We can also come back if we run short of an item here or there, or if something comes up that wasn't anticipated, and ask to borrow money. So those are two options that are available to us. So we can live with it, and I think that Councilor Romero Worth characterized it as manageable. I would agree with that. And then on the water quality topic and sampling and the treat study, I have no intention of permanently not doing the sampling that we have done in the past, or maybe even increased sampling, just not right now. We are going to do the sampling that is required. We are going to meet drinking water standards, and I wouldn't put one drop of water out of that plant if I thought that it was otherwise. As far as the treat study is concerned, there's no time-specific near-term driver for the treat study. It's something we've already done several treat studies anyways. This is not the first one. So we can delay that. I have every intention of doing it. It's just something that we identified that could be delayed and have it show up in the next year's budget. And so, Madam Chair, if you have any other questions, or if I didn't cover anything that you think I should that's appropriate, please let me know.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Helms.
I'd just like to make a point that vexes me every time we have this discussion. There was this wonderful graph that we were looking at a minute ago showing the spread between actual and budgeted, but it did not have a line in there for income. And we're an operation that actually produces a commodity of value, which we sell for money. And I would like to see a line in a different color showing what we actually produce. It seems to me we produce income far in excess of our expenses. And I don't know why we're haggling over expenses. I think the city, and perhaps the county too, but in particular, the city seems to regard Buckman as an income source, the whole amount as an income source. And if they have to dig deeper into it one year, then they push on our head and force us to, go lower. I don't see it that way. I think we should set our own expenses and say, this is what we need. And then what's left over, you get, of course. And that's a lot. We produce a lot of value, but I think we're being looked at in the wrong way. We should be looked at as an independent topic that it always produces value. It always produces money. As Commissioner Hansen said, people are still paying their water bills. And I think we should not be subject to the same budget pressures as the rest of the city, and I would imagine also the county.
Thank you, Mr. Helms.
I'm through.
Okay, Councilor Romero Worth.
Can we get a little bit more information on whether people are paying their water bills? I believe I've heard that we actually have seen that there's some stress with regard to that. Does anybody have any information on that?
Mr. Roach, do you? Dr.
Madam Chair and Councilor Romero Worth, I do have that report. It's what we call our aging report. I haven't looked at those numbers as of the end of July, but as of the end of June, we had seen an increased amount of people not paying their water bill. I don't have that graph right in front of me, but I could pull that up in the background here if the board is interested in seeing it.
I remember hearing that as well. And again, I would just make the argument that we are in extraordinary times. I think the staff has done a great job in coming up with a budget that we can use to move forward. We should be revisiting it. And I think it's really important that we get them a budget. So the fiscal year is already underway. Let's get this done. And then if you guys want to look at income, I think let's make a special agenda item about that. I'd love to have a special agenda item around overtime and how that works. And, you know, if there's some other things that we ought to take a deeper dive into, by all means, let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. I made note of some of those items for the agenda. I'd like Mr. Carpenter to express an opinion as to what Mr. Helms brought up. I mean, how does BDD figure out in all of, you know, I know that the water leads its way into the city coffers, and I mean, what's your opinion on this whole topic?
Madam Chair and members of the board, I'll take a stab at this, and I know if I mess it up, Mackie will save me, but my opinion is that the BDD puts forward a budget which is a request to encumber funds. The city and the county and Las Campanas place orders for water, and we bill them at least quarterly, not based on the budget. That's an estimate. We bill for actuals. So there is cash flow that comes in, but it's based on the amount of water that is ordered and the costs that are associated with that in actual terms, not estimated budgetary terms. We cover our costs that way. We can't run a deficit, and we can't charge more than what we're allowed to charge. So I guess I'm speaking in a little bit different terms than Mr. Helms, but I think that's really the only way I could respond to that. Mackie, Madam Chair, Mackie, do you have anything to add?
Madam Chair, members of the board, that is correct. So BDD's expenses matches its revenue, and the revenue is from the partners that contribute to those expenses. So there is no excess revenue. So that's why there's never a line showing you the revenue that's coming in, because it has to be the same.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Hamilton.
I want to ask this question because I think this is probably the only time in the agenda it's appropriate. Right now, both the city and the county, the water utilities are enterprise funds. But the way I understand it, the city is reorganizing, and you guys did this budget without knowing what that or approving that reorganization. I couldn't figure out where the water utility was going to go in that. I don't know, but I wonder, and I guess that's part of my question, how is that going to impact the relationship with BDD? And I'm asking in the context of wondering how it would impact our budget considerations, the BDD's budget considerations.
Commissioner Hamilton, the way I understand it is nothing, we are an independent body, and nothing that I heard, at least, Councilor Romero Worth can correct me if I'm wrong, but nothing that I heard in the budget hearings will have any immediate or impact or any impact at all on our operation. public utilities.
Is it standalone department?
Yes, it's not, it didn't change.
It's not moving anywhere.
Oh, that's why I couldn't find it, I guess, because the information that was in the article was pretty scant. So I,
Not, it's standing alone. There's nothing happening to it. It has no, the reorganization doesn't have anything to do with public utilities or the BDD.
Thank you.
And if, and I don't know if our staff has other insight into that.
Commissioner Hanson.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I haven't started. So if we're a standalone agency and we created a budget in June or earlier, and we reduced it to some extent, and then we produced a new one in June, and now we're producing another one that is impacting us because the city doesn't want to pay the amount of money that we originally asked for in the budget, or you're not budgeting the amount of money that we have requested, whereas the county is willing to pay their part. So if we're a standalone agency, why are we bowing to the city's issues about, well, we can't pay this, and so reduce the budget and reduce staff and reduce time here and reduce all these other, let's not do the treat study, let's do other things. I need to hear something that makes me feel better about that, because I don't feel good about it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Helms.
Ms. Romero made a very precise point, which is really quite helpful. She said that whatever our costs are actual, that we bill to the customers or to our partners or whoever, how we describe them, the city, the county, Las Campanas, we bill actual cost, which then begs the question, who determines what is cost? We should be doing exactly what we see is correct. Never mind what other people say about us, and the cost of it, we bill to the customers. Just that simple. So I think her answer was absolutely correct, and it's a wonderful answer. We should just run our show, and when the costs come in, bill them to the customers. That means I'm opposing this reduction in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Helms. That brings up a point that I recall during our budget hearing before the city. And by the way, that's the first time we have presented, as I recall, as I'm told, that's the first time we have, BDD has gone before the budget, the finance committee during budget hearings to discuss who we are and what our legal framework is, and then certainly discuss the numbers. And during that meeting, back to Mr. Helms' point and to Ms. Romero's point, it was definitely discussed that we do budget based on what our needs are, but some of, and I recall Ms. Romero, you saying that it's not a given that we will spend all of this money. We only bill, and again, we only bill for water usage to the partners. So, as I listened to the budget hearings, I felt more comfortable about this. And I also want to reiterate, I feel comfortable with the fact that the board can go back, and if our budget shows that we're in a problem state, then we can go back and we can justify what monies we do need. And whether those come out of the enterprise water fund or not, we know that money's there. And so I think that's the comfort that we need. It's justifying what you need. The discussion of BDD staff during the budget hearings was very professional, very well thought out. I wish we had the organizational chart on our materials that Mackie created, because it was really good. And, it showed how things are done. But I feel comfortable that knowing that if we have to go back, we do have a balance in our water, in the city's water fund. If we have to go back, I know we can justify it because staff does a really good job about that. And I think we have to recognize that we are in this year's a different budgeting animal, and we've never felt this before. And I think, we're erring on the side of caution, and that's not always bad in a budget process. I feel like definitely relying on staff and what they know and how they manage is important. We're the board. We're not in the nooks and crannies every day like they are. And I don't think that the staff is telling us what we want to hear, because I heard them during the budget hearings. I heard them go through some very big time questioning from all of the counselors anyway. And there was still discussion about the BDD at the city council meeting. And I hate to bring this up, but this could have been worse. We almost lost our litigation money, and we didn't. And staff did a wonderful job saving that discussion about litigation. And so I feel pleased about it, and I feel comfortable with the budget. I've always been of the opinion that, and I still am, that BDD is a separate organization. I think we still are. We accomplished a great deal with these budget hearings at the city. Many of the counselors didn't really know who we really were and how we were, enveloped within the city structure. And the way that staff, and I'll say our attorney, Nancy Long, did a wonderful job presenting, how we are organized and how it all works. She did a great job. And if you all were sitting in, you would have recognized that. And I think you certainly agree with me on Nancy's capabilities. So, I feel comfortable with this budget, and I feel like we can move forward. I feel like we have points in place where we can go back if need be. I think the city finance committee and city council overall knows that if we're coming back, it's for a good reason. We're not just willy-nilly wanting more money. So I think we need to give it a chance and see what happens, see what we can do. It's a different budget year. Next year, hopefully it won't be like this. So, I think we kind of have to do our part. Okay, Mackie and then Councilor Romero-Worth.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to remind the board members that I do provide quarterly projections, and we can change that, and I can provide monthly projections so that the board can see where we're at. The budget is a plan, so this is our plan that doesn't mean that things don't come up. We don't say no, if an expense is needed, we'll pay for it. We bring it back to the board. So we can do projections. I was planning on I do projections anyways every month, but I can actually present those to the board so that you can see where we're at. And if there's a moment in time where we feel like we might go over and we need to amend this budget, then we can do that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an option. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Romero-Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to disagree, I guess, with one thing you said about the budget hearings, and that is that we quote unquote almost lost our litigation money. There was absolutely a conversation about the amount that was budgeted for the litigation, that the lawsuit would come to trial in this fiscal year, and a questioning of whether there was enough money in that line item to meet what those costs may be, and an understanding that maybe litigation tends, when you actually go to trial, there's there's sometimes it's more expensive than you anticipate. And so I think there's absolutely an understanding that this could be a more expensive year. And I just want to be clear, there was never any indication that we shouldn't be providing for that line item. So I just want to make that clarification. Thank you.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I didn't mean it would go down to zero, but I did see some sheets where it was cut. Wasn't at the 2 million mark. So that's really what I meant. I was a little over dramatic. I didn't mean it went to zero, but it was at one time slashed a little bit. Okay, Commissioner Hamilton.
Yeah, I guess I should say it now. I actually really appreciate what everybody's saying. And there are some things I disagree with. First of all, I think we need it. I think next year will be the same as this year. I don't think the economic impact of this is going to go away as fast as even the pandemic will go away. The recovery from that won't be as quick. And so I do think we have to budget really carefully each year. I respect the need to try to keep our estimate of what's needed as accurate as possible. I don't think that our responsibility as board members to budget accurately is obviated by the fact that we can do budget amendments whenever we need them. Thank goodness we can do budget amendments when we need them, because none of us have crystal balls, and things haven't happened too often to us that have been completely out of the ballpark. But we did underestimate litigation expenses last year, just as one example, and we did something about it. I am a little shocked that we are arguing that we don't need our own projected O&M positions. I know I have so much respect for what Rick and Mackie did. I know they were trying to cut it to exactly, what we need and what we don't need. But when we were arguing about furloughs, they also said that we would make it through. Of course we were going to make it through. These people would never let, if there was any way to avoid it, would never let the system fail just because we were short a few hours. Of course they would never let. But I still think that it is that position is in fact needed. Can we struggle through? Yeah, we could struggle through. I'm not sure that's the responsible thing to do when we're talking about a facility that operates at an elevated risk because of poor design. That's my argument for that. There are a bunch of these. I think we are not very far apart, but there are a bunch of the reductions that I said before, and we could go through it, but there's no need. A bunch of them that I have no problem with putting off, and because the risk is manageable in different ways. I just don't see the rationale for not. We've done budget revisions, and that's what this process is supposed to be. I don't see why we shouldn't put in what we think is needed. I think a $1 million cut, that's just the rule of thumb. That's a way of looking and thinking about the bounds and going, that's a pretty steep cut. And if it impacts personnel, which it does, that's probably questionable. If it impacts sampling, that might be questionable. If it impacts some of the other things we've cut back, like projected electric use, the cuts on projected electric use, if the plant shuts down for a month, might never be seen. We would be fine with that. There is no question that we can cut out the 70K or whatever it was that we used to have to pay until June 30th to PNM. But just because I feel pretty close, I don't think it is acceptable not to make some additional revisions. So.
Okay, any more discussion? Commissioner Hanson.
So the way I understand the budget on Buckman to work is that it's a negotiation process. And the city has come back with paying a lot less, and the county is still paying their agreed share. That we are paying what we agreed in the beginning. That is what we approved in the June meeting. Now that the budget has been reduced, yes, we're paying a less different amount, but we agreed to pay the original budget. So I think that, you know, I have concerns. I have concerns about the MOU negotiations. Once again, sampling is an important issue to me. I have concerns about that. You know, I don't want to see, I also have concerns that, like Commissioner Hamilton says, about staffing. We have struggled for the last number of years about staffing and getting us up to adequate staffing. And so I don't want to see that falling back. This is a negotiation process. If we at the county and say, you know, this is not where we want to be, we want to look at this and look at maybe, you know, there's only a $500,000 reduction, or you know, a $750,000, or you know, 250,000. I think that this is a negotiation process. I respect the feeling of Councilor Romero Worth that, you know, yes, let's get a budget, but at the same time, let's get a budget that we are going to work with, and that we're not having to go to the city and saying, oh, we need more money from you. Even though there's money now.
Hey, Councilor Romero Worth.
Mackie, are you versed in how the budgeting process works in a regular year? I'm looking for my notes, but maybe you know. I want to dispel the idea that this is a negotiation.
So, Madam Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, we did put a timeline together for the budget. Is that what you're?
Yes, exactly. I'm trying to find it. I just can't.
That's fine. So the negotiation part of the budget did happen early on. That would have been probably around October, November, way in advance of the pandemic and the situation we're at. And that was the budget that was presented to the board in February, was a discussion that was a budget that was brought to staff, both and the partners, the city and the county and Las Campanas. And so this is definitely a unique year for us. Things happened outside of that budget process, or outside of that negotiation timeline. Our agreements stated that we needed to have a budget to the board so that the partners have time to put it in their budget by December. And we did that as of February. But again, the pandemic is requiring us to readjust those negotiations between the partners and reevaluate.
Right. So we usually have, okay, quote unquote, we come together in December, the staff, and we work out a budget, right? And then it goes, then what happens? It goes, normally it would go in February to the board for approval, correct?
And Madam Chair, that is correct. So I did find the document you're looking for. So and I'll just kind of read it out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The BDD budget process. So BDD staff prepares the budget for the next fiscal year. We typically do that between September, October timeframe. And then the BDD staff meets with the partners, the city of Santa Fe County, and Las Campanas. That's typically around November, to discuss the budget and negotiate, you know, what expenses. We also include water projections, which we typically get from the partners in December. And then the BDD then presents the budget request to the BDD board for approval and recommendation. That was done in February of 2020. And then the partners then take that approved budget or portion of the budget and then include it in their budget. And then in July, the BDD staff formally adopts that budget. And so that's what we had as far as the timeline goes.
Right, and so, and this year, the county approved that budget that the BDD had approved, and then COVID hit, and the city found itself in an enormous revenue shortfall. And so we had to take a deeper look at the budget. And so we couldn't do our end in terms of approving what had been submitted. So we had to, so that's when all this fell apart. And we had to figure out, you know, what we do in the uncertainty that we're in. We have no idea what's happening to our revenues long term. And so we are having to be very conservative in our budgeting. And to the chair's point, Councilor Vigil-Koppler saying that we are going to be revisiting budgets as we get a better picture, because we can't do what we have normally done, which is to rely on historical you know, data. So we're basically driving in the dark. We don't know where the road's going to go. And so what we're trying to do is be very conservative, be very conscientious. And I think the staff has said, you know, none of the, we're delaying things. We're not saying we're not going to do them. We're not saying that we're going to, you know, sacrifice water quality by any stretch of the imagination. We are just saying that, look, this is an extraordinary year, and we need to do things a little bit differently. And this, and I also want to dispel this notion that somehow the county is paying and the city is not. And maybe you can help me, Mackie, here. Everybody's contribution has been adjusted and is completely in line with our agreements. And so there's that piece, but then there's also the piece that we've been talking about, which is that we get billed, both the city and the county, for the water we use. And so none of that has changed. So again, I don't know why, you know, we've been at this, what, almost an hour and a half. And I really don't understand why. You know, we've heard from staff that we can operate under this budget. We have heard that we will come back if we need to come back. We have heard, I think, the stress that the city is under. We have heard that nothing is changing in terms of, you know, all the partners contributing at the levels that that our agreements require. We have heard that there's, you know, water quality is not going to be sacrificed. So I really, I guess I don't. And we need a budget. I mean, the fiscal year started July 1st. We are now in the beginning of August, and these people need a budget so that they can move forward. And we can continue to look at this as we get a better picture of things. This is not the last time we're going to be talking about budgeting.
Thank you, Councilor. Commissioner Hamilton, and then I think we're going to have to get a vote going. We have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Hamilton.
Many of those are fair points. I have never said that the county is paying more or unreasonable compared to what the city is. That's not the issue in the least. And I agree with that point. Everybody has to be conservative. And what Rick and Mackie did was try to cut things as close as they could without jeopardizing. And I respect that, I just respectfully disagree with selected pieces of it. And I feel like, you know, it may not be a negotiation, but the process is that the city and the county have every right to look at what the board sends them, which is what you guys did. It happens that the county decided they weren't going to relook at it. They would just sit on it. And what came through in billing was going to be perhaps slightly under if the BDD budget is reduced somewhat. That's neither here nor there. You looked at what you felt were reasonable reductions and have that budget's been reproposed. But it still falls to the board as board members, not county commissioners and city councilors, to say, oh yeah, we can live with all that. I can live with a good piece of it. I disagree with not needing a maintenance staff. I understand I mean, in fact, I think it's a little bit shocking to say we don't need that position when we have been understaffed in the past, and it's a maintenance position, and this is a high-risk facility, and we're about to go into litigation where I guarantee one of the things they're going to say is, you guys waffle on how you operate, you guys don't know what you're doing. The overtime thing is also something that to me is just easily predictable. There were a few other small things. If we're talking about a couple of $100,000 difference, you're arguing to me that it's a ridiculous thing for me to argue about. Maybe it is. Maybe it would be the right thing to move forward and then revise this in a couple of months. I just don't feel like I want to vote for eliminating an O&M position under the current circumstances. Otherwise, I completely respect, and honestly, we didn't actually make it through the furloughs without having to do some things that the board shouldn't sanction officially. And so, you know, that's really my position. I think it is appropriate as part of this process to say, yeah, we accept most of your cuts, but not these few, and we should revise it to that extent. That's my feeling about it. I'm not like going to the mat and, you know, for what seems like a ridiculous thing, but I don't think that's what the situation is. I really think it's something where we do have, my conclusion about what is predictable is just a little bit different. And yeah, I guess it puts me in the position of respectfully disagreeing with Rick and Mackie on where we go with that. You know, the snarky thing to say is, well, let's just cut the position if we don't need it. There's no need to be snarky. I think we've known for a while that we need these positions. And so if there is concern that if we wanted to do a slight modification, it takes too much time to go back to the city and ask them to ratify that, legally, we're already on another budget. We're on last year's budget. That's exactly what happened on July 1st. And we don't want to stay there because that doesn't reflect what this year's needs are. Maybe you or the chair can speak to how long the process would take to do some revisions to this budget, you know, and put it back through the city. Back through the city.
So can I just dispel? I didn't mean to indicate that what you were saying was ridiculous. So all I'm saying is we've heard from staff that we are fully staffed. So they have cut the overtime, recognizing that they can actually predict that they probably don't need as much overtime because we're fully staffed. So there's that. I don't think anybody is saying that these two positions aren't necessary. All we're saying is, all they're saying, not me, all they're saying is these are things we think we can delay and give us a little bit of you know, leeway. Right. And again, I go back to that graph. You know, the graph says we have budgeted more than we have actually spent for a long time. So again, I think we're okay here, and we're going to be revisiting this, and we're going to understand better where we are as we move forward and we have a better sense of our revenue pictures.
But I kind of, that graph is good for general rules of thumb, but we didn't end up with a huge budget surplus last year, and we're not fully staffed if we're a position down. And given exactly what we're in, that we will need more than just the overtime that's associated with the 36-hour, 48-hour shift work that they do. When you work 48 hours, even though if it's not overtime in net, it still has to be paid as overtime. As soon as somebody comes into that facility, calls in with COVID, and we're down some operators, we automatically are going to have more overtime than that. It's predictable. So, like I said, it may only be a couple $100,000 difference. I mean, maybe, and I didn't think what you were saying was that I was being ridiculous, but that if we're talking about a small enough amount of money. But I think those are predictable things that we need to put in the budget.
And yeah, Commissioner Hamilton asked how long would it take to get an approval through the city. I feel like let's do it now. Let's include a few more of these items, increase the budget, maybe 250,000, maybe it's, 300,000 more dollars instead of having to go back and get this through the city. I mean, the JPA does say that if we can't come to terms, then we live under last year's budget, which is what we are doing right now. And I think it would be better if we could come to an agreement and recognize that we have some concerns. And yes, I understand that we're not going to pay any more than our particular share, but I was saying that we had approved in February the budget that we had approved at the BDD. I understand that it's all being reduced, equally. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I mean, you know what, if you want to not vote on this budget tonight and have the staff come back and we take a deep dive into overtime and how they came about that number to make sure that, again, I think the staff has told us what they can do. I don't know why we're not listening to them. We are superimposing, some fears about overtime and about this staff position for what they have said they can do. So, if you want to give them time to make the case of, why they have to have this second position, I don't even know what it is, what you call it, O&M, operation and management position, and why they absolutely must have it. But that's not what the staff is saying. The staff is saying we can delay this because we can do some other things while we're waiting. We can reclassify it. We can, we've got some time before we actually need it. So delaying it is okay. So I just, again, and if you want to talk about whether that overtime number is the right number or the wrong number, then let's have the staff, if they're ready now, let's talk about that $110,000 in overtime that's budgeted. Let's take a deep dive into that number about how they came up with it. But again, we have heard from staff also that even though we have two positions that aren't filled, they are basically fully staffed for the first time in a long time. So they're not going to need as much overtime. And maybe they did factor in what Commissioner Hamilton is surmising might happen, which is somebody will get COVID and then we'll need to pay overtime to cover that position. But maybe that's already in the $110,000 number. I mean, again, the staff is telling us they can do this. I don't know why the elected officials who we are not in the day-to-day of this are supplanting our ideas for what they're telling us.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here as chair, because if I don't take control of this again, our meeting is gonna end, whether we like it or not, because there's another meeting at 6 and we're not done. So we have a motion on the floor. I think we need to vote on it and then we need to move on. So, the planning commission is next, so it doesn't change just because we're on the screen. And I'd hate to just be like booted off the screen and then we're done. Anybody have one last 30-second thing?
Do you have an estimate of the process you would, oh, go ahead, Tom, of the time it would take to take this back to the city?
I'm going to tell you something. The city has already submitted the budget, and the Santa Fe County probably already has too to DFA. It's a requirement. So I'm not sure how we get this all back on track, whether we go to committees, or I'm not sure how it would work.
So it isn't so easy. I'm just pointing out.
Not easy.
Well, I'm sure it has to go back to the finance committee. Staff would have to come forward with a recommendation. It would have to go back to the finance committee. The finance committee would have to make a recommendation, and then it would go to city council. So, it probably takes a month.
And that's exactly the way budget updates and budget requests and BARs are going to work anyway. That's how the budget's going to be updated. And I think even the city finance director said it could even be monthly. So, I mean, it's not our last shot. And I think I'm just going to say, we already have testimony from staff about this. And it was, it's convincing. And I did ask Mr. Carpenter earlier what his impressions are, and he gave them. So this is not a stuck in the cement budget. And there's plenty of opportunities coming up in the future to substantiate any claims for more money that we may need based on real data. But the staff has already presented real data. And I think it would be hard pressed for them to go back now and say, oh, we were wrong and we don't have data. We just think we were wrong. So it's too early, I think we need to trust staff. I think they've been very capable all throughout these meetings in the last 2 years, two and whatever it is. There's never been a problem that I have seen, but there's opportunity to fix it. I'm wasting time. I'm going to call for the question. So I move to call for the question.
Would you? Oh.
No discussion. Do I have a
No
second?
discussion.
JC second.
I said it. No discussion. You're right. I second your motion.
Thank you. So we're voting on calling for the question. Karen,
Okay.
will you call?
Yes. Yes. Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Mr. Helms.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yes.
Chair Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Okay, that passes.
Okay, thank you. The next matter is to vote on the main motion, which was to approve this budget.
Correct.
Okay, so Karen, would you please call for the vote?
I will. Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Mr. Helms.
No.
Commissioner Hamilton.
I have a problem. I really feel like the board's responsibility is to put in the budget that we believe is needed. And although I am almost swayed by staff, I actually disagree on 2 material points. And so I'll vote no.
Commissioner Hanson.
So regrettably, I feel like I have to vote no. Also, I don't feel like I have been convinced. And I feel like also that the staff works for the city and they've been directed by the city to reduce this budget. Dr. Roach got in here. First it was 26%. Now it's at least 10.5 maybe. So I'm voting no. I want more information.
Chair Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay.
2-3.
I don't have any more to say about this. So staff, I think now the ball's back in your court to determine, you know, I guess, I don't know how you do it. Figure out where you think you're short or whether you're still the same as you were when the budget presentation happened, but we'll put this on the agenda for next month. Okay, thank you. So next item, matters from the board.
Madam Chair, once again, I just want to recognize Mr. Carpenter, Kyle Harwood, and everyone for protesting this permit to the OSE or OES.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I want to put in the minutes that I'll state for the record and our minutes, and I should have done this earlier, but I didn't, that the only matter discussed during the executive session of our last board meeting on July 2nd, 2020 was the matter as stated in the motion to go into executive session, and no action was taken.
Thank you.
And I also want to recognize Bernadine for my nice picture behind me. This is Buckman, and she took this picture, and I've been using it, plagiarizing it from her Facebook page, and I'm going to thank her publicly again because she's sitting right there. So thank you, Bernadine.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next meeting is September 3rd, 2020 at 4 o'clock, and we are going to adjourn, but we have an executive session that I would ask if you take a quick stand up from your chair, stretch, and sit back down and sign in.
So I think Nancy might need to make a motion.
I will suggest a motion.
Okay,
and that is to adjourn this meeting and go into executive session in accordance with the New Mexico Open Meetings Act for discussion regarding pending litigation in which the BDD is a participant, including the Buckman direct diversion versus CDM case with the case number as stated and described in the caption on the agenda.
And I so move.
Second.
Okay. We don't vote, do we? Do we?
Yes.
We do.
Yes, Madam Chair, another roll call vote.
Yes. Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mr. Helms,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Chair Vihil Coppler.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Please sign in to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.